Hi again. Today I'm going to share with you a life-changing way to improve your communication with the ones you love and understand why listening is so important to communication. So stick around all the way to the end and you'll be a pro. Communication is key in relationships. And I want to send a shout out to Jackie P. She is the wonderful host of a podcast called Thanks for Sharing. Thanksforsharingpodcast.com is where you can find her. And I am literally going to relate some of the things I learned from her podcast. And she is trained in the Gottman method and has amazing things to teach about communication, a whole series. But when I was listening to this one little section, it just blew my mind at the greatness of it. So I want to share with you today. And it's the idea of listening. So when we communicate in a relationship, in any relationship, the point of communication is for me to relay a message to you or to the one that I am communicating to. And if that message is getting disrupted by a number of things, then the communication is not happening, and that's when it breaks down. So a lot of times I'm trying to communicate to someone an idea, and sometimes those ideas are sensitive to that person, or they have conditioning about that thought or an idea, or they're taking what I'm saying in a way that is not how I'm trying to communicate it, but instead how they are receiving it. So the communication is not happening because what I'm trying to portray is not happening and getting across. And the point of communication is to get the ideas across well. And it takes some help because I myself have my own insecurities, my own triggers. And so I do it too. They'll start to talk to me and I'm kind of off a little bit because I've interpreted it through a lens of my own experience. And therefore the communication from this person is now being tainted by the communication I've had in the past. So Jackie has provided me in my home with a tool that is so helpful. I just want to sing it to all the rooftops. So her suggestion is this. Now, the trickiest part is when this communication is starting to break down and we start to feel like we are upset or the other person is upset. And that's hard to do sometimes because we are human, to be honest. We are human. So if we can, the hardest part is becoming aware that we are triggered and that we are having this experience now through our past experiences. But whether you're doing the communicating or whether you're doing the listening, if you can pick up on that, then this tool is invaluable. So all that you need for this tool is a notebook or a piece of paper. And I think I would like to keep a piece of paper or a notebook with me wherever I go because I found this so helpful. So as the listener, so there's in communication, there's a talker and there's a listener, and usually the person that begins to speak is the speaker, and the person that is listening, or the person that's there, is the listener. So the job of the speaker is to speak, and the job of the listener is to listen. And too many times the listener interjects because, no, that's not true, that's not happening. And so then that's where we get a breakdown again. And that's what we call a fight or an argument. And it's so not fun. So what we can do instead is, as a listener, you get the notebook out and you begin to say, okay, I am going to listen, and you're going to take note. And the great thing about this is you just become a person that is creating a database. All you're doing is writing down what they say. And, and what helps this is a lot of times in communication, we are talking a million miles an hour because our senses and everything is elevated because we're in a state, right? But if I begin to write down, then the talker begins to slow down in order to allow me to write. So automatically the pressure and the tension has calmed. And that is a big step and a big helpful. So I'm going to start writing. Okay, so you are angry that you didn't get to and I made you this, and you're not addressing any of it yet. You are just going to write it down. You're just going to get it down. And as you're doing that, the speaker begins to feel heard. They've slowed down, and by slowing down, their physiological responses are now calming. And so half the work about this argument is done. Not only that, is because you're just writing it down and you're not reacting to it, you can separate yourself from it, then you are also calming down. Because your job right now, you're going to get it on paper. So anything you need to go back and argue is going to be right there for you to remember. You're going to get your chance. So, so it gives you some reassurance that your voice will be heard at a certain point. And if you have to interrupt, you could to say, okay, wait, let me make sure I got that right. You said you don't like it when I da 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 da. Okay, is that the right word? No, that's not the right word. Okay, so then there's going to become a lull in the conversation for a little bit, and you're going to write back. You're going to read back. So you don't like this, and you're upset at this, and this bugs you, and you're sick of this, and whatever comes up. And you're just going to read back the data. And then the speaker might say, yeah, and you might have a few more things to write. Okay, you're going to write it. You're just going to write it down, because the more data you have, the more empowered you become as a couple, not only as a couple with your spouse or with the person you're with, but with yourself, because now you can see on paper what the communication is and what you need to address and what is true and what is false. Then, after that person is done, the speaker is done, and you have just heard what they've had to say, you've written it down, you probably have a list of things that you want to rebuttal. And if you have time and energy, then you say, okay, now it's my turn. And the speaker now becomes the listener, and the listener now becomes the speaker. And the same exact thing happens. They're just writing down what they're saying. So there's no need to think about what they're saying or judge it. It is just getting the data down. So now what we have is two sets of information. And then we can begin to see that we're missing in our communication, and that's the problem. So he said this, he didn't like this. Well, I meant this. I didn't mean that. Or, well, when you did that last week, and so it made me this. So the conversation, the words might be kind of messy, but we give each side an opportunity to be fully heard, then things start to just fall into place. And the biggest thing is we've lowered our heart rate, we've lowered our speech so that we're slower and can communicate better. And that alone is one of the greatest tips I have ever experienced in communication. So there's a whole lot more to go. There's ways to speak well and those kind of things. This is not getting into that. It could be totally messy pieces of paper. One last thing. If this notebook and this data, if both people have told their side, if one person has told their side and it's like we need to take a break or this isn't going somewhere, take the break. Because we've got enough information down that we can return to it whenever we need. I guarantee you'll be able to return right to it. and get the information that you want to get across. So, so it's okay if it doesn't solve. In fact, Jackie talks about the fact that conversation we have decided is supposed to begin and end, and actually it could be an ongoing thing. In relationships, I think it's like 69% of problems in a marriage is unsolvable. So you're never going to get to the end of this conversation. But if we have these moments of, this is why it bothers me, this is why it bothers me, and we are writing them down and being heard, then the physiological response, which is where the problem lies, calms down, and that's the problem. It's not the stimuli. If there's things that the neighbor's wife tells the husband that you're like, I don't see what the big deal is. It didn't hit you in that way. And what do? It didn't hit you in that way, and that's okay. So it's the physiological response that's the problem, not necessarily the words or the actions all the time. So if we can weed out some of those physiological responses that come from our deepest wounds and our hurts that need healing and understanding, if we could hear that from one another, our communication would be greatly improved. I hope you try this technique. I hope that you enjoy being just a data collector. It has been so helpful for me as a listening person to just collect the data. That's all I'm doing. I'm not having to accept it as truth. I'm just collecting the data. It saves so much anger, frustration. It's a great place to be. So subscribe below to the Wholeness Network. We have wholeness hacks like this that can help you all the time and every day. So ring the bell and get notified. We'll see you next time.